and go to that. Yeah. That's your form. That I understand.
Have to do the ellipses at the top and then export it to copy.
What's the class set?
1 to 3.
Sorry. Okay, but I'll just write it down otherwise. Okay. All right. How long have you been here, Jacob?
Almost 10 months.
You started, you are a new agent too. So where were you before?
In education. I was an assistant principal at elementary school in Louisville.
Oh, LISD?
Yes, sir.
My wife works for LISD.
Okay.
She's in Hebron High School.
Yeah.
See, and I went for Dallas ISD because of they wanted to bring this program. So Eastfield College 7 years ago.
Yeah.
They said, if you teach over there, I said, sure, if it's going to make a difference to the kids, why not?
I live in Carrollton.
I live in Carrollton, right? I live in Carrollton, right? Yeah.
What part?
You know, the Josie and Hebron Homestead Homes?
Yeah.
So I live there, right?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Fancy neighborhood.
It's a nice, I've been there for 22 years, right? Yeah, when they were building new community, so I moved there in 2001.
I met a guy recently, Tom Washington. He lives in that.
Okay.
It's usually the one with all the political signs. Beautiful homes now.
They're nice homes here, nice homes. Few problem with foundations there, you know.
Carrollton?
Yeah.
Everybody,
right?
That's the Carrollton.
So yeah, that's the problem.
Went to a builder's lunch.
And
it was for what's it called? It's a David Weekley division, cottages just south of Frankfurt, over by Spa, in between Spa Castle or Spa Mansion, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And Frankfurt.
Okay.
Anyways, they're about to develop that. There's a lot of interest. We went to the interest level. And they gave the sales pitch, and you can buy a cottage for $330. So, and somebody raised their hand for questions, and they're like, you guys are aware of like the Carrollton clay soil, right?
Yes.
What are you doing? Are you guys drilling piers?
Yes.
And we've got structural engineers that have recommended just not doing piers. And so like half of the group got up and they left right after that response.
Yes. No, because there's a problem.
Yeah.
Even D.R. Horton did not put piers.
Yeah.
You see, they should have. Yeah. And at least Plano doesn't have as bad problem as Carrollton, but the whole Texas soil is clay soil.
Right.
You see, Castle Hills had the biggest problem when they started Castle Hills.
All right. That's where I live now.
Oh, you live in Castle Hills?
North Point.
Okay, there are a lot of problem when they started. Oh my Lord, buildings were like collapsing, you see?
Yeah. That's terrible.
Yeah.
I think they started Castle Hills in Carrollton.
Okay.
South side of Castle Hills.
Yes.
I think it's got 4% build out left.
Oh, Castle Hills, man, is going crazy.
Yeah, it's almost completely built out.
Yeah. Because I had a foundation problem too, so I had to put piers. So everyone.
We had a house in Carrollton off of Golden Gate.
Okay, Golden Gate.
From McCoy and Frankfurt.
Okay, McCoy and Frankfurt, right? Okay.
It's right in between Josie and.
Oh, yeah, because you were in LISD, right? Yeah, which school were you?
I served as a teacher for 7 years at Central Elementary. It's off of Fox and 35.
Fox and 35. Oh, no, so near Louisville. Right, okay.
And then I was an assistant principal across the highway at Lakeland Elementary, also Fox and 35.
Okay. So you've been teaching till now. Now you're tired of it.
Just not tired of it. Still love it, right?
Okay, so you are doing this as a part-time too?
No, doing it full time.
Okay.
I transitioned, but for several reasons.
Right, yeah, it's paid.
It's just kind of getting
It's
crazy.
zeroed out.
But I still wanted to be involved. I ran for school board for LISD
Okay,
last May.
okay,
Didn't get it. It's fine. So it would have been a lot.
okay. Yeah, because my wife has been there almost 17 years.
Yeah, you and I.
High school, yeah. My kids went there, you see. Nassim Purji. Yeah, my kids went there. They grew up here.
I love Hebron High.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the UN.
It was small, now they put a whole ninth grade sections. Yeah. I used to work for engineering companies, like I was with Motorola, then I worked for BlackBerry, they're already in Las Colinas.
Yeah.
And this afterwards, then I went to work for DART in the signal department. And then I got a call from Eastwood. They said, man, we'd like you to teach this course at Spruce. I said, okay. Because then it's accountability. I don't want to teach, because I will not teach regular class at Dallas ISD. There's no accountability. These kids literally we don't select them, but in 2023, all these 3 years I've had a valedictorian, and valedictorian from my class. One was the top in the whole district of Dallas ISD, out of 130,000 students. You see, because there's accountability. You don't work, I'll fail you, or you withdraw. So these kids work hard. And the TI, when they took my first batch, they only gave me one student to take. They said this school is pretty low level.
Yeah.
Now we want all your kids. Just bring them. We cannot provide enough.
Wow.
Oh yeah, because meritocracy, accountability. Yeah. See, and these kids work hard. And they think I said, if a kid in Frisco can go to MIT, you guys can go to MIT. Yes, you can do that too. But if you don't work hard, if you're failing, I'll pass you. I don't care. I'll pass you. And I've done that. And that kid today is working with TI. First, he just got a certificate. Then we told him, come back at Israel. Let's prepare you for associate slowly. We put him in job somewhere else. Now he's in TI. See? Yes. You need to show me working.
The kid takes ownership of their own education.
This kid was most important way is waiting outside my door just for tutorial. And I don't give homeworks. My class doesn't have homeworks.
Yeah.
So you guys, when I'm in the class, give me the best. I'll try my best for you. And when you go to Israel, you're competing with the adults, you're sitting with them, and you beat them up too. Yes, that's what I want from them. And they do that. They perform really well. Yeah. So because when there's accountability and they are willing to work. Regular class, you just pass them, then I don't teach them. And I won't.
Yeah. If you don't, you're getting your scores.
Huh?
Scores can drop.
Because if I send a kid to a TI, just is not capable, they won't hire the next batch. You see, they go. Like all of them immediately have a job offerings. Immediately. Yeah. That's food.
I think it's included with the
training.
sponsor for the.
Well, we do use them.
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't know if anybody's dived into it yet.
Yeah, no, probably not.
Yeah.
How much time?
Yeah, he can eat.
Get your blank.
Huh?
I got your.
You go to India, yeah? In Dallas, ISD has been spending a lot of money on carrying students. Carrying students. Most of the kids don't go to college. They don't go to college from that neighborhood. So this has really helped.
That's one, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, the right place.
Okay.
How was the Barbie
To
movie?
you all tough.
But
Huh?
How was the Barbie movie?
it was really lighthearted. Yeah, it was good.
Is there a charger?
Yeah, on the floor right there.
Yeah.
Oh, we're gonna see, what is it, that Oppenheimer movie?
Oh my
Did you
god,
see
it's
it?
so good.
My son said it was,
So good.
okay, my son said it was the best one in like a couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
seen.
Oh yeah, I mean, any Nolan film is amazing, but
Oh, really?
he's such a good director. Oh my gosh.
So what else, if I like this one, which I probably will, what else should I
Inception.
see?
Inception.
Inception, okay. All right, awesome.
Inception. Insane movie. It's one big mind manipulation. So good. Have you seen Inception?
No.
Watch it.
Where
It's so
to
good.
go for Oppenheimer? That's what I'll do, yeah.
Inception, dream inside of the dream inside of the dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, maybe you can grab our lunch now, right? Let's do that then. Yep, before we start the class.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's paid. It's paid. And we'll really. You have to pay it once a year to.
Oh, good, please, yeah.
Yeah. Wait, let me double check.
Oh.
No. Not exactly. So it's just 135. Hold on, you have to pay. Let me see. Because I when I paid stuff, I was-
same for this. I need to try it. This.
you. Please, yeah, because after I paid, I delete it. Okay, so if it's something, you send it to me. $213. $13.38. Here's chips and cookies now.
Oh, cool, thank you so much.
Right.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much.
No, that's not.
Thank you for the lunch.
You're still welcome.
Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna open those. Oh, it's the line. There we go. There you go. I sent it to
Thank you.
I thought, how are you?
Good. Did you
So Bob, yeah, I think. Got chips and cookies now, and your water solution right now.
I think.
Good.
You're welcome. Get it.
Meant to give you guys a lot of latitude, what you say.
Okay. That's fine.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You right? Well, how do you? You know, wow. Yeah. You have to look at.
I've always have been.
Have that opportunity.
You'll make this a fast class, won't you?
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be a great classes. We got our fine agents here.
About 30 minutes. Yeah, and take my. And so. Definitely. Behind you.
But my daughter is going into senior year, so I think I'm ready to get college visit. It's ready to learn.
Me too.
Yeah, talk to right now with Baylor. But it's praying that God will go before we have to start applying movies.
I'm sorry. Wow, yeah.
They start.
Hello there. How are you? Good. Yeah, anywhere you try. You're away. It's personal preference, I understand.
And then like yeah, I need to be like color I wanted thinking that was like after the game. Had a beautiful day. In here.
Do what?
No, they
Yeah,
water.
No water.
All right, this is Bob. You can take
Hi, Bob. I'm Sarah. Nice to meet you.
Hey, Craig out by Rockwell.
Yes, you guys. Yes, well, my name doesn't rhyme with Texan spec, so I can't do the rap.
It's nice to meet you. I will probably see you again. I'm gonna leave you with Sarah. Y'all have a wonderful meeting.
Thank you. So, Marcia, thank you in a good position to monitor Larry. Have you set up your signals there once there you go?
No, I'm gonna have to give him a signal.
Oh, yeah.
And it's 25, but into
it's a good point. That's the right instruction.
Either way,
It's like slapping around and it's on me.
Oh, yeah. She may not even wait till we get home. Yeah.
what works with the agreement.
So his daughter went at Ryan's to get the speed of a snail. I did grab a sandwich, thank you.
Get some water.
I thought sure that's a scholarship.
Too.
I'm on a roll. I'm on a roll. Yeah. It's $75 graduation on national.
Only hand out.
Yep. Jim. That's well, guidelines. We had money saved. That was me. Hey, are you doing now? Whatever it was.
I guess like, I think the best way to put it is that like she basically said like let's develop it like and use this Facebook, LinkedIn. And so far it's been going good.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's pretty. That was good. Oh, yeah.
So you've got money for that.
But you know how long this
Scheduled until 3.
We're all very blessed on a week. And it's just a matter of. I went there. And nothing. Either way, it's hopefully to get it well. She doesn't do really well on testing. That's optional.
Haven't seen you in a while.
And their job title. I was wondering if there's anything that you know about this. But it's student, I think it's. I don't like that. I don't have a bus already. Or in China, like, yeah, it's not really. No, there is. Well, in January, automatic exemption. So, yeah, I stayed on.
Yeah, I love the school. It's hard.
They're probably like, we're not so happy with the chart.
How many copies you end up with?
Really?
Okay, thanks.
She didn't want to try that.
Gotta give a chance for everybody to get in,
Oh, yeah.
maximum exposure.
Yeah, she knows what she wants. No, but don't make your decision for color based on that. And I think they're doing a good job. I did those things. Yes.
Oh my God. Look at all these people.
You're so lucky, Tom.
They wouldn't think you're talking. I'm on the back row.
So we get started. This is Sarah with Tax Inspect. She's trying to introduce everybody, so I'll give her a chance to introduce herself.
Hey, how y'all doing today?
Good.
Good. Just trying to stay cool, y'all. This Texas heat is getting us this year, isn't it? Well, my name's Sarah. I'm a marketing coach with Tax Inspect. I just want to share one very valuable marketing tool that I use every day that has helped me tremendously. And also just tell you a few reasons that makes Tax Inspect so different from other home inspection companies.
Sorry for my rude.
No. I'll make sure we got everybody. I'm not mad at it. I'm here for it. I'm like, you're sweating and you're freezing.
You're hot, we're freezing. Let's trade space.
Great.
That's chilly.
Yes.
Yeah. And set up the. Hey, young lady.
Are we good?
Yes, ma'am. Good.
Perfect. Okay, guys, if y'all look in these blue folders, lovely blue folders, you will see a card with the Rolling Hills of Ireland on it. You take this card and you fill it out, and I will pick them up. What this does is it puts you into a drawing for a trip or two to Ireland on Tax Inspect. Every time you complete.
Is it Ireland, Texas?
Oh.
The Ireland?
Otherwise, we could send y'all to Paris, Italy, and all kinds of stuff. Saves some money. So fill these out, and every time you complete an inspection with us, we'll send another one of these guys out. And we'll send it back and we'll put you in the drawing again. And the drawing is every January. Also, another gift we want to give to you guys is our Monday morning motivators. What that is, it's designed for you to take our name off and put your name on. It's a weekly email that you can send to your clients and your future prospects to kind of keep you at the forefront of their mind. So they know y'all are still there. That's important, right? All right, raise your hand if y'all have a business card. Good job.
You don't have a business card? Brooke, you don't have a business?
We all have business cards. Okay. Well, one thing that I found to be very helpful is this digital business card. It has an NFC chip on it, and you can just scan the phone. Right here, it'll come up. I'm sorry, I have the privacy screen, but it'll come up and you'll have a profile. And on the profile, it'll have your email, a call now button, an about button, basically saying, hey, I worked as an agent with Keller Williams for 25 years, you know, just a little bit about yourself to let your clients know more about you personally. It has your office address, my personal hours of operation. It has an add to contacts button. So instead of sitting there, them having to put your name and number and email into their contacts, they hit that and all of it just goes. It has your website. I have my training classes on here that Tax Inspect offers. You can have any kind of classes that you want on here. My favorite one, it has a photo gallery. And it also has videos that you can upload. So if you're showing a home, put it on there. And you can customize it as much as you want. Anytime something changes, go on there, take it off, put something new on. And it links all of your social media accounts. So that's very beneficial. I got this through Vistaprint. It's $30, one-time fee. There's no monthly payments. A lot of them like Link and stuff like that, they make you pay a monthly fee. Vistaprint doesn't. So I found that to be extremely helpful. And guys, it's so user-friendly. Like, I'm not very tech savvy by no means, and I can do it. So there's a little bit of that. And then also, also they have like a ton of different options. Like, this is a total catfish, but I look great on this picture. Whenever I come into these offices, y'all, my makeup's from the floorboard by the time I get here. So you put all your information on here, super easy. Okay, a couple things about.
I noticed the ladies laughed about the makeup question. None of the guys laughed.
Oh, no. We live in Texas. It's kind of tax inspect. What makes us different? We train our inspectors to use a charge neutral approach. What that is we don't make mountains out of molehills, and we don't gloss over the important stuff. We don't want your clients making a decision based off of fear or a lack of knowledge. Also, we know y'all have really short option periods. We got to get these inspections done, completed, so y'all can do what you got to do. We have same day, next day availability. Also, we have a true online scheduler. You can schedule an appointment for an inspection 24 hours a day, 7 days. Very user friendly. And you can also request inspectors on that as well. We also have, I worked for the school district for 20 years in Mansfield. There's not a lot of things that we give to our teachers, but we have a heroes discount. What that is for teachers, doctors, firefighters, paramedics, first responders, veterans, and active military. It takes $50 off of their inspections. And I absolutely love that feature because we're kind of giving back to our community. And last but not least, y'all, we have a 200% guarantee. And I know that sounds crazy, but what it is that if at any point during your inspection, if you or your client aren't completely satisfied, not only will we not charge your client, but we'll actually pay for another inspector of your choice up to the original inspection fee. Okay. So y'all give us a chance, and I promise that you will not be disappointed. And it was so amazing to meet each and every one of y'all today. And do y'all have any questions? Yes.
Y'all still do, you produce the inspection right there on the spot, so you walk out the door with it?
Yes, we actually have on-site reports. As soon as the inspection is done, it's printed, emailed, and texted with color printed photos. It'll go in an awesome binder, and it also has a bunch of information in the binder about taking care of your home in Texas. Some people come from California or up north, and everything's so different. We have to put silver hoses around our house to help our foundations. It's not that way up north. We have a lot of clay. And so it's little things like that that help the homeowner take care of their home. Any more questions?
You have a price list for how many, this many square feet? This is your price?
It starts at $299 per 1,000 square foot. Yes.
And it depends on how many services you want from them, because they do the whole thing. They do a pool, they do termite, you know, the whole range. So it depends on what it is you want is what the fee would be.
Yes, we are a one-stop shop. We not only do home and termite and carpenter, and we also do sewer scopes. We do foundation elevation. We do separate structures like docks, mother-in-law suites, anything separately from the home that has power, electric, water, anything like that. We offer so many different services with our home inspections that you can add into that I have not found in a lot of places. Our mold, usually a lot of other companies at 72 hours. We get ours back in 24. It's 2 inside the home and 1 outside the home.
Okay, perfect.
Hey,
Let's give her a hand.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good
Thank
deal.
you.
That's a presentation I've ever seen.
Good.
Great.
You haven't seen her cohort, her colleague, Craig, who also is with Texas Bank. He was at our Rockwell office and he does a rap. And if you've never seen a good old white boy do a rap, and he just, I mean, just without any, just goes over and it's hilarious. It's really good. Huh? Yeah, they could do that.
I could.
Yeah, he could.
I could be bought.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody has material. When you walk out, you walk around to the McCoys, they were, heck is Jack. We won't use his name. We won't tell anybody that he was supposed to be here and didn't show up. It's okay. I don't take that personally. Thank you for being here. Thank you for appreciating the fact that our client agents take the time to serve on the panel and work through this. Is there a seat there? Yes, yes. Are here. Okay. The concept of what we're doing is negotiation strategies. Last week, we did negotiations that you use to obtain a listing or take on a buyer client. Today, we'll talk about the negotiations. You've got a buyer client and they've identified a property, and how do you help them negotiate to buy that property? And same thing with the seller, accepting an offer. And so we look at the offer to contract page. We'll also look at the after we have a contract. There's some negotiation points there from contract to closing. We've designed these questions that you have specifically to give the panel members the greatest opportunity to give answers. Because what we want to hear is what are their strategies? What do they do? What do they use? So we want to learn from that. So it's purposely fairly broad in the things that we talk about so that they'll be able to do that and work all the way through the process. So I want to have each of the panel members introduce themselves and tell us what they'd like for you to know about them, and they get to decide on that, by the way. So Nick.
I'm Nick McCoy. I've been here in the office since 2002. Got a small team back over in the corner, Lee Banner. That's about it. What about me? I am a aficionado of very, very good dad jokes. That's my lane.
You have any good dad jokes?
Sure. What do they call, what do seagulls fly over the sea? If they flew over the bay, they'd be a bagel. There you go.
Bad dad joke.
I gotta follow that.
Did he follow that? No, sorry, your boss said no.
I'm Larry Levine. My first exposure to the office was in 2002 at the Christmas party when Marcia joined the office. Wave, Marcia. I got my license in 2007, and I was a proud sign boy of the Marcia Levine team until 2020. Made that my full time. It became my plan A in November of 2020. And was on my own for about 14, 15 months. Was doing a lot of business, making a lot of mistakes, driving Marcia crazy. Got the opportunity to join Brad and Jessica on their team, and they have to put up with me now.
Yeah, if I remember, we all remember things a little different. His family was in the auto parts business, and he got into real estate. And I seem to remember that one of his first transactions, he made like $10,000. He said, "Bob, you know how many auto parts we got to sell for me to make $10,000?" That was a real eye-opener. Oh, this can be a good business. So that's really good. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Angela Taylor, and I live and work mostly up in Prosper. So it's you guys often, and I realize most of you don't know who I am. So
you see her name right beside it says the top producer. So remember, she's the award winner.
I have been at this office since maybe 2019, I think. That's it.
You're a sole agent, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have an exceptional husband who has his license, but we realized pretty quickly that he did not want to be in front of clients and dealing one-on-one with people. So He takes my files and he sends them over to Max and Angie and does our back office stuff and gets my CDAs and.
He allowed you to do the business. We appreciate that.
Yeah, it's pretty great, so.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Cindy Shell, and I have a small team. There's 2 of us. My partner was actually here last week.
Yeah, sure.
And I've been in the office since 2016 when I got my license.
Good. So it's just a 2-member team. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll just give each of them an opportunity. Remember the concept of this. We're negotiating pretty much everything. And it's just, like Brody says, we're all in sales with some shape or form. So we tend to think of negotiation as being very specific, like I'm negotiating for a client to buy a property or whatever, which is what we're going to talk about today. Last week, it was a different negotiation to obtain a listing, work through it. So we explain this and we talk about the principles of negotiation that we're going to make use of here. Preparation, purpose, and strategy. So we're going to start off with a scenario where you represent a buyer, you've identified a property that they'd like to purchase. So under preparation, where we're going to describe the purpose of the information you obtained. So our first question is, as you look through this, how do you negotiate for your client? How do you obtain the information? For example, this might include property information, market information, information about your buyer, such as motivation, so forth, and other aspects of the buyer's circumstances. So here in the preparation, what are your strategies? What do you do to prepare as you're going to negotiate for your buyer? Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I think preparation is very much the key part of this, and setting the proper expectation with your client, having the conversations with them to find them motivation. Are they going to be homeless in 30 days, or is this just a move because they don't want to put in a pool in their own backyard? They'd rather buy somebody else that already has it, but they're fine until they find that right house. So what's their timing? What's their motivation? What's their budget? Have they been pre-approved? All of those things that get them to the proper point of being able to pull the trigger on something, and walking them through a scenario or two. So if you take kind of that part of an educator approach with your client and you say, here's how it could go. They're first-time home buyers. It's going to be much more education than somebody who's bought and sold and relocated 10 times, but you still go through the process of, all right, well, once we find the house, here's our flow chart of what's going to happen next. And here's a couple scenarios, because in this market, here's the market update, what's going on right now in this price range in this area. Thank you, Chartmasters. So that kind of thing, getting them prepared for neutrality of possibly multiple offers, or how much is typical to negotiate, knowing a good house will always sell quickly. And then if they've identified the house, then all the prep work on the house, which I don't want to steal everybody's thunder here, but yeah, dive in, find out from the tax records how long they've owned it. Is there a previous MLS from 2 months ago? What documents does the agent have online that you can download ahead of time? The seller's disclosure survey, any list of upgrades that they might have. If there's not stuff posted online and it's a substantial enough property and you have the time to do it, contact the listing agent ahead of time. Go ahead and reach out, introduce yourself. Hey, I plan on showing this house. Just wanted to say it looks wonderful online. Can't wait to show it. What should I point out that's not obvious? So you start that dialogue and that relationship rapport building with the listing agent, makes everything a whole lot smoother. So I can go on and on, but that's a big part of it.
Larry?
Everything he said, plus to get to your scenario where you've identified the property, I think you have to start at the first, where you're really having a deep conversation with your buyer client and finding out their true motivation. Do they have to buy? Are there, making sure they talk to a really good lender that you're comfortable with and that they are really approved, they really have cash on hand, they're ready to go. And that way, when things come up, you can go back and remind them of what they told you, what motivates them. I guess over the years, I've learned how to read people. Some people, we have a 20-step process approximately of what a buyer goes through to actually move in a house. I think I've learned over the years, some people want to know all the details on every step. Some people just want to know, what do I do next? And if you give the person that only wants to know what's my next step, if you give them all 20 steps, they get freaked out and get stagnant. And that just comes from.
That's presuming they even listen to you.
Yeah.
Often they don't, right? And you got a lot of practice at people who don't listen to you.
I'm listening.
That was silence.
Yes. Yes. The other thing is, most are a lot of buyers are a couple. And you have to dig deep on who's the decision maker, who's deciding the budget, who's deciding the location, who's deciding the updating. A lot of times one spouse has a hard, fast budget. The other spouse wants something that's really nice, a little over the budget. I might nudge the budget spouse and say, from my experience, what's it worth for you to have a happy spouse? And $10, $20, $30,000 over 30 years is a couple of dollars a day. You want to come home to a happy spouse? And that usually moves the budget.
That's an interesting strategy. It's good.
It is kind of frightening, sharing my strategies with you about your business. Angela?
So I'm listening to you, and what I'm hearing you ask, if I'm correct, is we've already identified this is the house they want.
Yep.
Okay.
This is the house they
So
want.
I'm not working on
Make an offer. So you're not worried about all the housing which show
At
them.
this point, I'm going to say the number one thing you need to do, you better be having a relationship with that listing agent. You need to call and say hello, introduce yourself. Hey, I showed your property. My clients are interested, and then shut up. Let the listing agent talk. Pull more questions and let her keep talking. I say her because I'm a her. So if it's a him, it could be a him. The more you get that other person talking, the more information they're going to give you. And sometimes they're going to disclose stuff that you wouldn't have known otherwise. They might say something about, oh yeah, we've got to get these people moved. Like they have to close immediately. You're going to get these little pieces of information that are helpful for you to go back and build a good offer. You're going to ask questions like, do your clients need a lease back? Is that important to them? Do you have another house for them to go into already? Or do you need time to find something? That's when you're gonna, hey, if you've got clients that are already in a lease or they don't have to sell their other house first, they've got time. That's a great way for you to be able to negotiate a better offer is, hey, we could give you a free lease back, and start thinking of how you're gonna make your offer look better because of the information you're getting. And I do agree, you need to go in, like Nick said, and look at the history in MLS, because if you're just taking the listing for what it is and you don't go back and see the history that it's been under contract twice and it has fallen out, you're going to miss out on some key information. And so I just had this yesterday or the day before. I called a listing agent because I've got buyers who are interested in a property. And I went into history and saw it's been under contract twice and it just fell out again. And so I called him and I said, tell me what's going on. Why have you lost 2 contracts? Then you let him talk. He's talking to you about the first contract, talking about the second one. I'm asking now, okay, do you have inspection reports? Because now I need to know, what are we getting into when it comes to repairs? Are we going to say, well, hey, we'll take this, but we want these things done before. So I'm really listening to what the other person's saying. The other thing is, I have won so many multiple offer situations just by having a good relationship with that listing agent, being very communicative. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Please be a professional. If you do this for your job, for your living, be a professional and leave feedback for a listing agent. There is nothing more frustrating as a listing agent than having your sellers get so excited that they've got a showing and they've cleaned up the house, they've gotten the kids out, they found a place to put the dog. They let you come in and show the house, and then you're crickets because your client didn't like the house. If you want to build a good relationship and reputation in the community, you need to have the courtesy and the professionalism, is that the right word?
Yes.
To leave feedback. And that's what it is at the end of the day. Take the time, go in and leave feedback, but building that relationship. The minute I show a house that I know my clients are interested in, they even said, hey, we kind of like this one, we might be interested. On the way to the next showing, I'm already calling the listing agent saying, hey, I just showed it, they liked it. We're on our way to see some others, but tell me about it. Tell me what's going on. Do your clients need a lease spec? That's where I'm getting all the information from. I have won multiple offer situations before where we were not the highest offer, but the agent specifically said, man, you called right away. Like, I've had great communication with you throughout. And as a listing agent, that's what you want. You want someone who's going to be on the phone every step of the way and someone who's easy to get a hold of, who's answering their phone. So build that relationship up front.
Perfect.
Yeah, no, that was, I mean, over the course of the three of them, that was pretty much everything, yeah. I mean, I am a listing agent also, just like everybody else here is, and when people don't communicate with you at all, it's very frustrating, and it can make for a very long transaction. And so you do want to be with a person that is not transparent, because you don't want to be transparent, but that you're saying, hey, you know, my clients really like this, tell me what you like, you know who this other person is before you even start negotiating, because if they don't know you or feel like they know you, then it makes it harder. I also have done this pretty much since I started. As soon as somebody likes something, I send them a quick text, I do whatever. I sometimes will do the feedback on the way, like you can be sitting in a light and do that quick feedback and just write at the bottom, my client is very interested in this property, I will be calling you. And then they can expect your call. I do that a lot. And sometimes when I start doing it, I've communicated with so many people. I have a history in my text messages that I've talked to them before. And so it's also good to kind of remember people's names and build a reputation for yourself as being a fair negotiator and a good representative of your buyers. So. Perfect.
Great. So the key here is you're pulling things from each one of them and some common elements from all four. They've kind of brought into this, but focusing on the buyer, because this is great information. She's absolutely right. As you represent a buyer, and we're going to talk about and a few questions down about the purpose of all this. Is it just a contract or what? But you would all agree probably that every buyer is unique. So talk to me a little bit, Cindy, about your strategy for really getting a sense of the uniqueness of this buyer and how that's going to affect your negotiation.
Okay, well, I was showing a house this weekend, and I will say it was a great house on paper for my clients. It was exactly what they wanted. Absolutely. We went inside, and the house, I've started referring to it as the witch house, because I felt like somebody that lived there possibly was a witch or thought they were a witch, because the floor was so strange. And there was so many, there was so much weird stuff going on in there with the decor. But so my buyer, one of them was seeing that it was exactly what they wanted, even though there was weird stuff in there. And the husband was like, we got to get out of here. This is weird. I don't know what's that. And I'm like, I don't know, but we need to keep walking through. So you need to know if you're, not that phobia is, I mean, that's kind of silly, but you need to help them look past what they see, regardless of what we all strive to do with our listings and make them be so that everybody can see their own things. Not everybody does that. And some people might have a weird wooden cross and a rosary sitting in the middle of the room. And that was the only thing they had there, which is what was happening in this house. The bed might be really elevated and it looks like there's some sort of secret trap under there. It's like really weird. You got to be able to look past that, and you have to help them do that. And so to get them where they want to go, you have to kind of sometimes guide them without telling them what to do, but say, I know that that's weird, but look at how big this room is. Look at what you could do with your furniture. Sometimes you might have needed to see their house and kind of see what their style is to kind of pinpoint the ones, because when you're looking at a picture, you have a lot better, more professional, to use your word, you can see that room is going to be too small. There's not going to be anywhere to put it because you look at so many pictures. And so maybe help them through that and say, I know that you think you like this house, but you're probably going to want your bed here. And, how do you see your room fixing, your furniture and all that kind of stuff. So maybe helping them.
So instead of talking about this and talking about the uniqueness, one of the things that this is pointing out is that every buyer is going to have a different way of relating to a property.
Yes.
And that physically you're in it, it's different than what's on paper. Right. It's one of the reasons we actually in our office have a form. If somebody buys something sight unseen, oops, because when you finally see it. And so when somebody has that unique reaction, to a property. That's huge communication about your buyer to you. I mean, that's, well, you know, especially since the two had a different reaction. He went, whoa, gotta get out of here, kind of thing. So that's really important as you go through. You now have new information about how you're going to negotiate your behalf. Angela?
My answer is going to be pretty similar to the last question, and that's listening. This business, if y'all haven't figured out, it's not a sales business. And if you're in it because you're a good salesperson, then I hope you get out of business, because it's about relationships and how you can help people and figuring out what it is that they need in their home. I mean, like, we have the best job. It's so great to help people find their home. But when you're talking to a buyer, it's about building that relationship over time. You want to have several different conversations with them and ask them, what does your family like to do? What are your hobbies? Talk to me about your kids. You have kids, what ages are they? So that you can start to think about, oh, these people have a kid in high school and in middle school and in elementary. Gosh, we better find a great family neighborhood that's close to schools. You hear them talking about traveling all the time. We better be close to the tollway so you can get down to Love Field or, you know, DFW. They start talking about a job and you say, are you working from home? Are you remote, or are you having to go into an office? Because you really need to understand what kind of commute they're okay with. Have you been to this area? If they're an out-of-state client, you need to know if they're familiar with this area. Sometimes I will ask them, especially if they're out of state, what is their area like at home? And it's important also finding out, what is your house like? I've asked people before, hey, send me your listing of your house from home, because I am guilty of this. I have an opinion in my head of what a good house is. And like, this house is fabulous. And I'll look at something, this happens where they've told me what they want. And I see this one house in MLS and I'm like, ooh, I'm not sending that one. That's not a good house. And then they send it to me and I'm like, oh gosh, why do they like this house? So then I have to start asking questions and I say, hey, you know, I saw that one. I didn't send it because I saw that the kitchen was pretty outdated. And then they'll start talking. Oh yeah, well, we don't mind updating a little bit if, you know, if it's just countertops and this. Okay, now I'm opening my mind and saying, well, shoot, there's these other listings I could have sent them. So I think it doesn't matter if you're dealing with a seller or a buyer, or if you're dealing with the other agent. It's about asking more questions and listening and having conversations. You should be talking on the phone, not just a text message, like an actual phone call. Yes. Take your notepad and write it down.
So do you have a sense that when Angela is working with a buyer or seller, because of the focus on the relationship, now everybody is unique, she really knows those people to know that deal. I mean, there's a relationship there, and that's going to matter for everything. And that combined with the relationship of the agent, I mean, that makes a huge difference. But it really, she's able to bring out that uniqueness. It's like, well, they like that house, that was okay. And you go, no, you hadn't thought through that. It helps you understand that sometimes your perspective, your bias about what's a good house and not a good house may be significantly different than them, but unless you go through the process you talked about, establish that relationship, ask those questions, you won't know. And you'll be missing showing them the right house. So great point. Larry?
I'm gonna piggyback a lot on that. I ask hundreds of questions of buyers. I feel like by the time we're in a house, I know the minute we walk in whether they're gonna like it or not. I have been surprised. I definitely have been surprised, but for the most part, I know what they're, by the answers to the questions I ask, I know what they're looking for sometimes better than what they're looking for. And
you should have said,
the other thing I do, and from studying negotiation, is what's called mirror and matching. I have a tendency to want to go fast. You know, if I see a house that fits them, I want to get them in it, get it, make a decision, go, 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 go. And so I have to have that
statement, by the way.
Yeah. I have to have a good conversation and tell them that they will set the pace. I have the capacity to go at light speed, or I'll try to go slow if they want to go slow. I'm gonna get frustrated if they want to go slow, but I'll go slow. You know, I studied a lot of Chris Voss negotiating tactics. If you haven't read Never Split the Difference,
yes,
it's not an exciting read, but reading his psychological warfare techniques in negotiation will help you win deals for your clients.
Nick?
Yeah, it's just like they said, it's get to know them and know them better than they know themselves sometimes, you know, having that expectation in your own mind when you're talking to them. I joke with them sometimes, initial consultations where I say, I'm going to be your best friend for the duration of this transaction. At the end of it, you're going to miss me because you're not going to see me every day, talk to me every day. But during this time frame, we're going to talk a lot. We're going to get to know each other very well. And this is all going to be in an effort to give you the best possible ending of this transaction, house you love, blah, blah, blah. So I'll set that expectation so that they don't feel like I'm just either making small talk or prying one way or the other, depending on their personality style. But you're actually, this is all serving a purpose and it's to better serve them. The other thing I thought of just was, as many questions as you ask, and it kind of speaks to the being surprised afterwards. Sometimes you can't, or they're a little unwilling to share exactly how they react to a house until you go out with them. And you can think that you're fully prepared and you selected all these houses online, one or two, however many there are. And you think that these are going to be the perfect ones for them. You walk in and then all of a sudden they start reacting in a way that you totally didn't expect. So you have to be able to pivot and pick up on that right away and let them know, all right, next time we go out, we're going to be looking for this, this, and this. Does that sound good? Make sure that you're reassessing all their motivations as you go through, because they may say something at the beginning, later on you figure it's a little different. They didn't even know that, but you figured it out by going through houses. So
can I add something real quick? I guess just what you just said. I had a buyer 2 weeks ago. I thought it was the perfect house for them. And she walked in and said, I hate this. And so I took out a piece of paper and I said, I need you to tell me in as blunt a fashion as possible what you hate about this house. So I never show you another house like this.
Perfect.
Hopefully you don't.
Yeah, and so now we have our latest person who showed up. Everybody introduce themselves. So introduce yourself, who you are, with the team, and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, Jack McCoy, been in the business about 6.5 years now. I'm on the real McCoys with my parents and my brother, which is just can be a joy to work with sometimes.
No relation.
Yes,
no relation.
No relation. Yes, yeah. Even though you do have,
I'm a joy to work.
It is. Even though some of your clients pick up our pies, our clients pick up your pies. But yeah, so I've been a buyer's agent for about 6.5 years now, averaging about 25 to 40 buyers a year. So what else?
So it's all. So the question that we're just addressing.
Yeah.
Every buyer is unique. 100%. So what's your strategy to really learn about it? You heard what. Yeah, of course, Ed. So
Larry's questions. You can't ask enough questions. Getting into the buyer psychology of the DISC profile and realizing, hey, do we need to be in a house 25 minutes, 45 minutes, or 10 minutes? And I think that changes with every single buyer you work with. And making sure that showing time or broker bay, you have enough time scheduled for each of those buyers. But I think, again, to Angela's point of when you go in and they're like, hey, I actually am okay making changes to the house or the kitchen, well, that changes the price point. So understanding that and being able to kind of adjust on the fly, are they okay going up to, let's say, $750, and they were telling you, hey, my budget's $700, if it's the right house. So I think questions is really the big one for finding out the uniqueness of each buyer.
Okay, and a little bit to what Nick and Larry both saying, asking all the questions, but sometimes being surprised. You go into a property and you say, well, I thought this was a reaction. Even you go as far as you do, like when Angela and Cindy both with relationships and all that, you won't know everything. Sometimes you won't know until you actually are there and you watch them. And one of the little negotiating things that they taught us way long ago, if you've got a couple and they're walking through the property, watch their proximity. Closer they come together, better they feel about how they are in the house. So you watch for all those little signals and all those little things, because it can really make a difference. Anything any of you want to add? Any questions the group has for on this person?
I mean, I think this did hit on one point that I just kind of want to mention. It's not about negotiating, but when you are out and seeing houses with a buyer, the first time I go out, it is really hard to schedule with broker bay or showing time, because you don't know how long is it going to take. 45 minutes because they're going to see the whole house, then they want to go back through and show their BFF. Is it going to take 5 minutes because they can go in and come right back out? So I usually, plus the surprising things where they walk in and they hate it, or you find out, oh, they're willing to do renovations. I feel like, and I usually do tell my clients, hey, after we go out and see houses together for the first time, this is really going to help me know better what you're looking for. Because you start to pick up on what they're reacting to, what they're liking, you're listening to the comments, you're hearing what they're saying. And then you can go back in and narrow down, okay, I know after we saw that one, she's not going to like this neighborhood. So I'm going to take these out of the emails I've been sending. And it helps you to just really narrow down on what they're looking for. But going out with them in person, I think just for one weekend or something, that's always going to help.
Sure.
One thing also with couples that I've noticed is the one that's doing the most talking is not usually the one that has the final say. You can't get too excited when one's talking.
Everything that doesn't agree with that.
That's it most.
Okay. Any questions from the group or anything to accept? Before we go to the next question.
So how long do you take you set up the time for that?
That's a good question. So if it's my first time out taking a buyer to see houses and you're trying to figure out how to schedule those, I usually try and do a 1 hour window. So listing agents, it's very frustrating if you only put a 30-minute showing time on there because we're trying to schedule multiple houses. I try and do the 1 hour, and then what Showing Time had that was great that Broker Bay doesn't have yet. Showing Time, you can actually put in a cart and it will tell you how far the distance is and drive time from one house to another. So sometimes I'll still build it in Showing Time and then schedule through Broker Bay, but you want to take into account how long the drive time is. If you're showing during rush hour and you've got to get from this city to that city, you better take into account traffic. And then the other thing is you need to have Broker Bay and Showing Time in your phone with the number saved so that if you're on your way and you're running late, you can call and reschedule to a later time. I will also call the listing agent sometimes if we're like making really good time, especially if it's the first time that you're with a buyer. You may have scheduled a 1 hour window and you're flexing, and now because the first one only took 20 minutes, now you're ahead on everything. So I'm calling the listing agent on the way there going, hey, we're really running ahead, and they probably understand that. And you just ask, can we come early? If not, take your clients to go get coffee. Starbucks. Sit and talk about what you've seen, or I mean, literally, that's the best time to sit and talk with them. Hey, we've seen a couple of properties, instead of sitting in the house where they want to talk. Because a lot of times they'll go into a house that they're not even interested in, and they want to talk for 30 or 45 minutes in that house, but they're actually talking about a different house they just saw. So
I hate that house.
Yes, exactly. And the poor sellers are like, they were in there for 45 minutes. And then you have to tell them they are not interested. So if you can take them to Starbucks, that's better.
Perfect. Okay, so all these things we're doing in the preparation phase, we move to the next phase about the purpose of the negotiation. If we're dealing with him, start with Jack. So when I look at this, the question, what is the purpose of negotiation? And the first little sub question, is the purpose just to have an offer accepted? Because you're in that offer to contract phase. So is the purpose of negotiation get your buyer's offer accepted? Is that it?
No, I mean, I think it obviously is, right? You want to get them under contract, but I think at the same point, you want to take all of the liability from the buyer and put it on the seller, on top of making sure that they're getting the offer that they want accepted. It's one of those that.
So it's more than
just getting it accepted.
Okay.
Because I can go 50K over and get it accepted, but is that good for my buyer? Probably not.
I can say take all the liability off of the buyer and put it on the seller. What liability?
Yeah, I think on that, it's going to be like as you're walking through, making sure that if there's foundation issues or anything like that, that you're doing, let's say, a 7 or 10 day option, and building that into the contract so you have enough time to get those inspections and to get those liabilities taken care of.
Okay, fine.
Nick?
Yeah, I mean, it's not at times over the past couple of years, it's been, at all costs. And you have to prep your buyer appropriately for that if they're in a certain price range, certain area where the win will just be getting the house at whatever cost, as long as they're prepared, of course, within reason. And can make up the difference and yada, 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 yada. But no, it's not just getting the offer. It's knowing their hot button issues and making sure that those are properly cushioned, accounted for, whatever you want to say it, in the offer itself, in the contract, once you reach agreeable terms between buyer and seller. And part of that's all the finding their motivation and everything else. And so what are the terms that mean the most to them? And can we maybe de-emphasize those when we're talking to the listing agent to start off with and offer something else that really doesn't matter to the buyer in order to get the things that really matter to the buyer. So.
Perfect.
Larry, short and sweet. The purpose is for me to give my client exactly what they want. It's not for me to beat the other agent negotiation. It's for my client to walk away thinking, knowing and thinking they want. They got what they want.
Or as close to it as you could get.
Exactly.
You know, that's an issue point. And based on some of the earlier conversation about knowing your buyer and all those kinds of questions, you're making some decisions about what you think is important to your buyer. We actually have a later question dealing with the contract closing stage about the trade-off, because when a buyer is looking at going through the process and getting into an offer, and that's a little bit of the very next question. What is it that's acceptable to your buyer? One of the challenges with buyers is they don't understand when they make an offer, what they could end up in a contract on a house. It's not just, hey, let's make an offer and see what happens. And you just make a binding offer. This offer can be a binding contract. And so when they do that, you know, with this, they say, well, yeah, our goal is, you know, and this is not 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, this is today. Their goal is more than just an offer. And it's what the three of you are saying. But they need to understand what they've just done when they made an offer. They can now be in a contract to buy that house. Because they'll say, okay, wow, that's great. First warm body show up in 6 months and they wrote an offer. It's good, you know, go through that process. You're right. Angela?
I mean, I think the same thing everyone has said. I also think you should, again, it's really just asking more questions, making sure this is the house they really want. If your buyer says they want this house, they want to put an offer, but they're like, let's lowball, and they want to go 50, 60 under asking. Unless for some reason all the comps are saying that this thing's overpriced by that much, then I'm going to start asking more questions like, are you sure this is the house you really want? What is it about this house that you're not liking? Because if someone really likes a house, why would they undervalue it that much and take a risk of somebody else putting an offer and getting it? And it's also sometimes taking extra time. Like, I know we all want to have things under contract that day. Sometimes it takes extra time working with the listing agent, working with the buyer to find out any little bit of information, things that you really need to negotiate more before you go under contract. It's not a fast process all the time, and sometimes a fast contract isn't a good one. So I think my standard answer is going to be ask more questions.
Yeah.
Just across the board. I think that helps in every.
Okay, great. Cindy?
Yeah. I was going to say, which, kind of the same thing, that you really have to know before you put the offer in. You really have to know almost everything that there is. You're not going to know everything, but the most you can know about a product before you make an offer. You need to know the most there's to know. I mean, like with the HOA stuff, I've had a lot of problems in the last couple of years with HOAs. I mean, yes, you love this property, but do you realize, and you don't necessarily say it like that, but you want to let them know everything about it. Like if the HOA is going to be $3,000 a year, they need to really be reminded of that and all those kind of different things that they might want that might affect their negotiating too. They might offer less because they know they're going to have to pay a community enhancement fee, or they might have to pay other things. So knowing all there is to know from the listing agent that's available to know, looking around and seeing things that you might see that they might want to change, that might affect their offer, it might not. When you're in a multiple offer situation, sometimes you can't do those kind of things. You also need to know if your buyer is even going to be able to behave in a multiple offer situation. Some buyers don't even want to be involved in that. And then maybe this time of year is not the right time for you to look unless you just have to. Maybe it's better for you to be looking when it's slower and you have a little bit more time to think about things. Because some people feel pressured and they might feel like they made a mistake. And you can kind of see when you're looking at them and listening to them, their level of anxiety about different things, even if they do love the house. well, I love the house, but I don't want to offer $50,000 more. I mean, you kind of need to listen, know everything there is to know before you even start writing it down, and tell them everything that you know in advance. So. Okay.
Now, the next question is a little variation on that. You've all kind of answered it, so we'll see if you've got anything additional. So it's every accepted offer automatically good for your client? What I'm hearing all of you say is, well, not necessarily. Anything you want to add to that concept, that little variation?
I had a deal last year. It was the longest negotiation of my life. I wasn't sleeping. It was a $2.5 million listing that my buyers wanted. And I read that book specifically for this one client because he loves to play the game of negotiations. And I'm saying game. He likes to play a game. So I read this book because he told me to read it. I read the thing in a day and it was long. I spent 2 weeks negotiating and we got down to the last minute. Like I'm talking about literally like the last 15 minutes of option, which we had extended twice because it was 2 weeks long. And at this point we had a seller and the buyer arguing over the way that the line item was going to be written about how the roof was going to be repaired. And so I finally, after all of this, and trust me, there was a lot of prayers involved in this one. And finally I had to call my buyer and say, listen, if I call you tomorrow and tell you he's accepted and he's going to do the words that you've got, are you going to be over the moon excited? Is this your dream house? Are you ready for this? Is this what you want? And he paused and he said, I mean, I don't love the house.
2.5 million?
My God.
2.5 million?
Yes, true story. His wife was like the one that wanted the house. So 2 weeks, the longest negotiations of my life. And I probably, it was just spinning my wheels the whole time. So, but I had to do what was right for him at that point, which was to say, if you don't love this house, why are we doing this? And we terminated. And boy, did it stink. And it was like,
yeah.
At least you read the book.
At least I read the book. But also, guess who else had read the book? The seller who was also the broker. So the two of us, I'm like, well, let's do this.
Tell everybody to look again. Never
split the difference. Well, I would sure love to make that happen for you, but how am I supposed to? How can I do that? How can I really make that happen?
Wow. Perfect. Yes, question?
I didn't fire him.
Yeah, first.
Probably should have. Yeah. No, it was,
Did you find him another house?
did.
Same negotiation process or different?
Well, we were putting an offer on, yeah, it's a long story. We were putting an offer on that $2.5 million property and his wife signed and then he ghosted me for the next day and a half while he thought through it and we ended up not getting that property, but it was fine. So yeah, we're just not doing anything with them right now.
It's clear to me, service
you require beyond that which I can provide. It would be unprofessional for me to stay in the relationship for a commission. Therefore, I release you from our.
I'll have Marcia write that email.
Can everyone get out your memo thing and record Bob saying that?
They're the crazy thing is they're great people and they love me and they think the world of me and they refer me to all these friends and I've helped
Because they
their
know
kids.
you know how to negotiate.
And I'm like, but it's okay.
So did it change your process you went through with them? Did it change how you move forward and negotiate with them and with others?
Yeah, because again, and you also really need to recognize if you've got a buyer. So sometimes you'll have an engineer client, which you'll know right away, just by the way that they respond. You'll say, are you an engineer? And doctors for some reason. Sometimes if they're really used to being the boss and they want to run things, you need to learn these things about your client because you could be $2.5 million contracts in before you find out that this person just really likes to be in charge and really enjoys negotiating and playing games. And
there's a lot of people like that. There's a lot of people that just enjoy the whole, I mean, is that what you were going to say?
I started those. So here's the problem. If you really are in the business for relationships, there are going to be times that you'll be taken advantage of. And I have gotten burned on that many times, couple times this year. And it makes you mad after the
Have you
fact.
ever learned to accept it?
Well, I just have to know it is who I am, and my personality is that I'm going to give somebody the benefit of the doubt 10 times out of 10. And my husband is always the one like, you need to drop them. You need to drop them now. They're wasting your time. And I'm like, but what if? So
a byproduct of your style, your relationship is that sometimes you will be taken advantage of. And you will have to get past that.
Yeah.
But you've learned to do that, haven't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Any question?
How do you drop the client? You just give them send a letter or something, or?
I have only ever maybe dropped one client.
And what do you do? Just send them in?
I think I've said, you know, it doesn't sound like I'm able to help you. I don't think we're working. I've dropped sellers before. I don't know that I've dropped buyers. I have dropped sellers, and that's when I say, it sounds like you know what you want. I'm not sure that I'm the agent for the job. I don't think this is as good of a fit. And I wish you the best. I hope you sell fast and high. And then I walk out.
Another good book for that too, if you want to know about personality types, is Surrounded by Idiots. It talks about, I mean, that's not
a personal statement.
It's
like autobiography.
Right.
So Bob, I think your question's a trick question.
It is.
You put a word in there that doesn't belong. That's the word automatic.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's always false.
Yeah, it is always false. Yeah. There is no automatic. Not when you deal with people. And you learn that from the relationships. Now, I've got a little bit of a twist from the next question. Well, what does a successful offer to contract phase look like for you and to your client? So pull both of those together.
No tears.
Successful would be closed. We just left the clothing table and people are happy and not.
Have you ever had a closing which people were not happy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're going to talk about that when we get into the contract close phase. I got a question to deal with that. So in this case, where it talks about what does it look like with you and your client, the two together, these are not always the same, are they? I mean, you want to help your client get what they want. But as you go through the process, you're going to have your own agenda, I think, so you can clarify this to me. You're going to have your own purpose of this is how this successful phase looks like. And this is how I pull this together with what I, the agent, Express will do, and what my client ends up with. So do you find yourself, as you look at those two sides, that there's ever a conflict there?
Well, yeah, the example I just gave, that $2.5 million deal, it was set to close 2 weeks later. And that's when I had to stop. And I really had to pray on that and say that, like, God help me to be okay if this isn't the deal that's for me. Because it's really hard when you're walking from a $60,000 commission at the end of the year.
Oh, yeah.
But going back to what is the best interest? What is in the best interest of my client? And is it for them to buy this house that he's not in love with? Or is it for me to make a $60,000 commission and get this $2.5 million added to my vault? Because I can be very oriented and get focused on that, but then I come back to like, okay, that's really not what the bigger picture is. So yeah, there's going to be times when that it doesn't turn out the way I want. But here is what. Let me go back to put a nice, pretty bow on it, because yes, it did suck. There is no happy ending to that piece, except that I learned from it, and that is the only thing in this business. The best way to learn sometimes is to get burned. And it's just like when you're a kid and mom says, don't put your hand on that stove, and you touch it just to see, and then you won't do it again. And so you have to learn from every transaction, and that's how you become the best agent.
I just want to point out something that I just kind of, you re-emphasize that I've learned. Not to put the commission above the relationship, because how much have you been able to make since then with the referral?
Sure.
I mean, what is the number?
But even if I hadn't gotten any number from it, at the end of the day, you've got to live with yourself. And are you in this business only for the money? And if so, again, please get out. We don't need any more. It really needs to be that you want to see this family get into a house that fits their needs and that they're going to love. And that's what I tell people. Like, if I'm the only one, when I'm showing a house, if I'm talking it up, I'm like, isn't this great? And I'm looking at them and I'm like, But if I'm the only one who thinks this, let's get out of this house, because this isn't where I'm gonna live. This is where you're gonna live. So let's make sure you like it. If I ever feel like I'm selling something, then I step back. So
You really aren't a salesperson. That's not
yeah,
all. I mean,
I think it's offensive when people
yes,
say that we're sales.
you're not a salesperson.
You're a consultant.
Okay, so into our next question, where, I mean, we kind of semi-touched on, it's not automatic that just getting to a contract works, but as you're negotiating for your client to get them into a good contract. So you look at the question, where you work through this, not all contracts close. So what can you do in your negotiation? What's your strategy to make that more likely to close so that when they do end up in a contract, more likely going to close? Is there anything you can do in the negotiation stage as you work through it? Jack, let me let you go first.
I think for me, it goes back to the questions. If they've either been under contract before or bought a house, you have to really see what they like, what they don't like, and if there were any hiccups in the previous one that they found out after they were under contract. Because I know for me, on especially first-time home buyers, it's just laying out everything that's going to happen during that first. I mean, from when we meet to looking at houses to the option period are really going to be your biggest hurdles.
Once you get into a contract.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's laying down everything on top of if they've heard anything from their parents that are friends that have gone through and had a not so great transaction, what they're afraid of, what they're not afraid of, things like that. Because kind of like what they said, it's, you can be afraid of something, but they can look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's fine. Like, okay, it's not really what is important to me, even though obviously I'm going to call out things that are important that they may not know, but it's what's important to them and not me.
Can I piggyback on that one?
Yeah.
This just happened to me just in this past month. I had clients that were relocating here from New Jersey. Obviously, the East Coast is different. We've got a lot of moisture up there, humidity. They just had a mold issue with their last house because they had an attic that didn't have enough ventilation. They were building a house here in Texas, and he was like going nuts over the way the attic was done and was very meticulous. And if I didn't know better, I would be like, what is wrong with this guy? But then I'm listening to him and I hear all of a sudden, okay, I had this issue on my house. Well, that's a fear. He was scared because of the past experience. So then I got the head of the sales for the entire division for the builder and had him come out to the house with us, not sales, the head of construction, and walk the house, talk to him about the city code, talk to him about what they had done, and then put in writing that this is how it's supposed to be. And if there was an issue, that the builder's going to come back. And they were ready to walk away from this house that they had been building, but all he needed was someone to answer that fear.
Right.
Yeah, he needed someone to speak to that fear. And so that's a great point, is you need to pick up on what is it that's happened in their past transactions or whatever. That's going to help you know how to help them best on getting it closed.
So you can be very proactive because you know things that after in contract, it could be a problem.
Yes.
So you're resolving that up front. Hey.
Yeah, so the making sure that the contract allows for the due diligence, that you will put your client in the best position to have their fears, qualms, past experiences checked out so they can feel comfortable and feel good about moving forward. And then having the resources available to be able to overcome things where you start to, your spidey sense goes off and you start to feel like, oh, they're acting weird. There's something wrong there. They've got some hang up and I don't know what it is. So let's dig deeper, ask the questions about it, and then making sure that you are the conduit for someone they will trust or information that they will trust to make them feel better about whatever that is.
Good. Larry?
Nobody that witnessed me last week can laugh, or they can laugh if they want to. The number one thing I think we can do to increase the likelihood of it closing is to keep everybody calm. I was unable to stay calm that last week, but in general, the more we can keep people thinking reasonably, reminding them their motivations, reinforcing, being the person of confidence and calm, and everything's gonna be fine. You're
And everybody on board with moving towards closing.
And by the way, that's on both sides. Sometimes you
Right.
have to be the adult in the relationship with the agent on the other side and lead them by the nose on how they can share something with their client that they need to, that you may not think they know how to or can provide.
Yeah, so you can understand the other side's client's motivation that can go, like you talked about that earlier, on asking questions. And then one of the other things Chris Voss talked about is ask questions and enjoy the awkward silence. Because if you can just sit there for a couple of minutes, they're thinking about what they can say, what they can't say, and they end up just telling you stuff.
And I found out if you're getting cussed at or name called by another agent, you're probably doing the right thing for your clients.
I'll try to. Angela?
Well, I think I kind of already spoke on that, didn't I?
Yeah.
I took kind of my time. I mean, I'm in agreement with what's being said here.
Okay. Because it is, everybody, first of all, it's clear, not all contracts close. And as professionals, we need to understand what are the primary things that keep that from happening.
Actually, sorry, now I do want to add one thing.
Okay.
I'm sorry. One of the things that can happen if you've got an out-of-state lender. So one of the ways to keep your contract on track to close and actually get it to close is making sure that you're following up on timelines and that you are checking with lenders to make sure, are we clear to close? What are we still looking for? Because things can come up throughout, and that would be, if you're asking early enough, you might have time to put out that fire. If you wait to ask until it's too late, maybe a done deal. So
sometimes it's as simple, by the way, as they're in a different time zone and your ability to communicate in a time-sensitive manner might be hampered.
Well, and the problem may not be with the lender, it might be with your client. And so you
also
develop that really good relationship with the lender as well, or as much as you can. And say, by the way, if there's anything they're not getting you that they need to get you, would you let me know? And I'll help kind of prod them along in a nice way and get them where they need to be so that this all does what we need to do on time. So don't always jump to the conclusion that it's the lender's fault. It might be your client.
Yeah. Cindy?
I think that I mean, we've been saying that since we got here, just communicating with people, listening to people, talking to people, and really knowing the different phases of the contract, the different phases of the contract to close. Even if you have Marsha or another transaction manager on your side, you really need to know too. You don't want them to be the one telling you, yeah, you need to know this. You need to have already known it. And talking to everybody, and basically you're a team. I mean, everybody's on a team together, and the team is to get to the end. And so everybody needs to know what's going on. So you need to communicate with everybody from beginning to end and really know the timelines and make everybody aware of the timelines. And that's pretty much helps.
Okay. And you kind of load a little bit into the first question under negotiating strategy. So at this point in time, you've gone through preparation, you gained good information, you've got a good, clear mediation strategy that you've developed. So what are your strategies as you go through this, your specific strategies to help with in this? For example, to what degree do you educate your client on this negotiating strategy and what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and why, and all those things? Cindy?
When do I communicate what? Negotiating what?
For example, under negotiating strategy, question 1A, what degree do you educate your client on the process and the desired end result? How far do you go to explain it to them?
I explain every part of it to them. And if they're the type of which these are always my people, they want to know everything right at the beginning, and they want to know it again every single time that happens. They want to talk about it again. They just talking about it all the way through and saying, okay, we've done this. Now the next thing is going to be this. And then they want to know more, then you tell them more. But if
you make sure they understand why
yes,
you're doing that.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
No reason for somebody to be in the dark.
Angela?
Well, when I'm first talking to a buyer, especially if it's a first-time home buyer, we talk through what the process of buying looks like, what that timeline looks like, about the different monies involved, that it's not just a down payment, because a lot of times first-time home buyers don't realize there's other costs associated with that. And then I'll tell them So I kind of give them the overload of information on the phone, and then if they're a learner like me, they need it again in writing, so they can process it and then look later. So I'll tell them, don't worry, you don't have to write all this down. I'm going to send you an email. As soon as we're done, I'll follow up with this. When they first go under contract, I'll send a next steps email. Hey, congratulations, you're under contract. Here's the next steps. You need to order your inspection. You need to do this. Let me know if you want, a referral for that. All the things that need to be done, that goes into the email. And then throughout the process, I'm walking them through the steps, and I'll tell them, hey, we've got to have, this is our deadline that we're up against right now. Today's the last day you can back out. Are you sure that you want this house? Is everything good? How is your loan looking? Are we done with this? Great, we're moving on. But I think a lot
of education there.
I talk a little bit. Yeah, I talk a lot. No matter what.
You're responding to what you think they need to know to understand why certain things are happening.
Yeah, I think we give them all the information, and then if they want less, and I do tell this to buyers often and sellers, I say, I'm going to give you all this information, but if you want less, just tell me, and I'll stop giving as much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Larry?
I'll have surprisingly enough, I'll ask a lot of questions to the buyer of, we've identified the house, let's say it's a $620,000 house, for, how do you want to go at this? There's a couple different ways we can go at this. Do you want to offer a low price and kind of fish to see where they'll go? And of course, I've talked to the listing agent and gotten their motivation at this point. Or do you want to go in with your best price? And here are the pluses and minuses of going either way. What I found is a lot of people like to negotiate. They like the idea of going in low. They're afraid to go in with their best price. I try to emphasize how powerful that can be, especially if I talk to the listing agent and say, hey, if we send you 615, will your clients execute this today? Those kind of questions get asked. And I try to relay that to the buyer, get them to understand that. Some of them don't understand it. In that scenario, a couple of weeks ago, the buyer said, no, I want to offer 550. And I said, I'll have to find you another realtor. Not doing that. So I'd said it with a smile on my face. But we played that game of back and forth. When we're negotiating through the process, and situations on the table that we're negotiating repairs or whatever, I'll say, here's some things we can do. You can go this way, you can one of two or three ways, and here's what could be the results. Which one do you want to go with? And when they identify which one, I'll get more specific. We're going to present that to the seller. They could come back these three ways. How are you going to react if they ignore your request? How are you going to act? Are you going to be ready to move forward on this house if we get agreement? So I'm trying to, in a concise way, discuss all the possible scenarios. It's complicated, but trying to get them to think about, they may have to get out.
But how far you go is a little bit what Angela said. If this is too much, make an adjustment. Start giving them that. Only give them what they need to know to make good decisions, which means you're making a judgment call what you think they need to know. Okay.
Yeah, very similar actually. I wrote down here buy-in. And so that's kind of going through the scenarios with somebody when you're in the midst of the negotiation, or when, here's how I'm going to present the offer. I'm going to present it this way because of this, and this that I found out that I've already discussed with you that I got from the listing agent about X, Y, and Z that the seller wants. So if we go in this way, here's how I see this playing out. Is that good with you? Great. Or do you have any other thoughts? Do you have any other ideas or anything like that? Generally, I'm not going to go. Well, it depends on the person. I'm not going to give them a ton of options. I will have already been building towards the way that I think is going to be the best way to negotiate with the other party to get my client what they need along the way. So at the very end, when we're actually doing the submitting and we're in the midst of countering and things like that, they already know that this is probably going to get them the best result in this particular manner. Hold firm, nibble, whatever. So
that anything?
For me, it's setting the expectation up front. Honestly, doing the buyer appointment. I can't say that enough, only because I've gotten burned way too many times not doing a buyer appointment and then them being left in the dark because they're like, oh, I didn't understand, when you may have explained it to them on the phone or over email, but sitting down with them, going through a PowerPoint or going through any sort of buyer presentation with them they understand it, or they have questions that they can ask during that time. But yeah, I don't know how many times I've gotten burned that and I say burned, they just didn't understand it because they weren't walked through it.
Like what was your burned on?
Just why is it a $500 option? Why is it a $5,000 earnest? Just stuff like that where to us it's easy because we do it every day, but to them, they just don't understand it.
Or it wasn't like that the last time they bought.
Yes.
Correct.
I get that.
1972. Okay, so you're kind of implied to this as you're going through this negotiating strategy. I get a sense that as you get information, you in fact are prepared to adjust. Because as you go through a negotiation, you get new information, as you get progress or lack of progress, you make adjustments. Does anybody want to say anything about that? Because I sense from all of you that you've got a flexible negotiation strategy.
I will say I lead with being the other agent's best friend. Marcia doesn't like it, but I'm over friendly, over nice, and a lot of times that's come back to bite me, where they'll then think they can take advantage of that.
Sure.
They find out very quickly they can not take advantage of that, but I have to somehow not always be their best friend. But pivoting within that relationship, I think, is important.
I think having the nice working relationship is essential, and it really does help you to help your client more, because it's a lot harder for them to say no to you when you're asking for these repair requests. If you've had that good relationship so far and they like you. One of the things that I talked to the other agent about up front is I do say, and I heard you say it a minute ago too, we're both on the same, like we're working towards the same goal here, which is to help your client and my client. Your clients want to sell, my clients want to buy. We're trying to get to the same finish line here. So we'll work together, and I will do that, and I will help as much as I can until it's a point that it will cross a line where if I'm going to do this for you, that's not going to help my client. There have been times where other agents didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know the contract, and I do. And we've been nice, but I'm going to, at that point, I've got to say, okay, well, I'm not going to explain this part to them because this would hurt my client. My client is benefiting at this point from me not saying anything. So you do want to be really have a good relationship, but to a certain point, don't let that cross a line where you're not helping your clients, because your job is to help them first and foremost. So.
T47 and survey deliverance in 2 days is that's a fun one.
Well, get that done before. If you're listing a house, have that thing done and sitting in the MLS. Because that gets to be in the MLS.
What's that when it says in the comments, it's in MLS, but it's not. But it's not. You have to call them and they're like, it's not there. Yeah. And it's like 3 days before they know why it's not there.
Good thing you're a professional and can handle it. Okay, so I want to go to the last question under negotiating strategy. This deals with the red flags. Yes, ma'am.
Red flag, we got one.
Well, and here's the key. When you begin to see red flags, that could it put you in a position where you're going to adjust or change the negotiating strategy, even to the point of ceasing? That's it.
Yes, absolutely. We just this past weekend, I took clients to see homes in one particular neighborhood. And I think we saw 4 or 5. There was one house that was priced beautifully, well below the rest of them. It was the perfect house for my clients. The kids are running through the house. This is the house that we live in. Everybody's excited. We're leaving. And I'm like, great. This is the house we're going to go home and put an offer on. And when I got home, I started doing some research, and I'm pulling up the information in MLS. And I'm like, this says that Highland Homes owns this home, but this is a pre-existing home, or an existing home. And this house is 4 years old. So why would Highland be the owner? So I start texting the listing agent. Is Highland Homes really the owner of this home? Yes. Then I'm digging again in the history, and I'm seeing that the original owners purchased the home from Highland in 2019, at the end of 2019. And then at the beginning of 2023, Highland Homes purchased the home back. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right. So then I start asking the listing agent, tell me why Highland, it looks like Highland purchased this home back from the buyers. Is that the case? And he said, yes. Really? Why would they do that? What was wrong with the house? oh, nothing, the house is perfect. This is a perfect house. He literally said perfect. This is a great house. There's nothing wrong with it. But then I went through the MLS and there's also a document you have to sign that says they're selling the house as is and you can't sue them for anything. And I'm like, whoa, these are red flags. So yesterday, this guy, well, I explained all this to my clients. Hey, look, Highland bought the house back. Not sure why. He says it's in, you know, perfect condition, but they're not going to fix anything. These are red flags. It was a red flag to them. The guy calls me back yesterday because now he's home from vacation. He's like, hey, are your clients still interested? And I was like, well, no, not really. I mean, they loved the house. It was perfect for them, but we've got big red flags here. You're saying that this house is perfect and yet Highland bought it back. And builders don't buy houses back. So you got to tell me what's wrong with the house. And then he says, well, okay, you know, there was a roof leak which caused mold in the house, but it's been remediated. The house is perfect now. And I'm like, okay, you should have told us up front that there was mold that's been remediated because that's an acceptable answer to me. Houses get mold. They have to be remediated. Send me all the paperwork that shows me it was remediated. We can have a mold test and see if it's good now. But when you hide something and you don't disclose, yes, it had mold, that's red flags. So no, we're not offering on that property because.
Yep. Big red flag. Yep.
Big red flag.
Did he have documentation?
Yeah, and he said that he did and he was going to send it to me. I've yet to get it, but at this point, we don't need it.
And remember, this builder is not one of the 11 sellers who doesn't have to do a seller disclosure notice. That only applies, never occupied property. It only applies to the builder right up front. So now they bought it back, they have to do a seller disclosure notice. That's one of the questions on the seller disclosure notice. Even if cured, still has to be disclosed.
Right.
I promise you they didn't.
And inspections.
I've shown 2 houses that Highland bought back.
Wow.
That they were all out there in Prosper area.
This wasn't in Prosper.
It was
in North Lake, but
this was in, there were 2.
Okay. So
they were new and they bought it back for a foundation. Both of them were foundation.
So does everybody agree that you are aware, you pay attention to potential red flags? Because it could cause you to just end negotiation.
Well, so you're in the middle of negotiations, you're making your offer, you're doing counter back and forth. If you saw all of a sudden starting to get like exasperation from the agent on the other side of it, when they're explaining their client's position, you might be dealing with somebody who doesn't have a good relationship, doesn't have a good trust factor with their client, and maybe they don't trust them, so maybe you shouldn't either. That's a red flag for me.
Yeah.
The seller throwing closing costs just like that, and a lot of them starts to make me wonder.
Why are they doing that? Yeah.
Closing costs. Hey, here's $30,000 concessions. You're like, okay, what are we missing?
Yeah. Okay.
You haven't had that?
We don't have that much mobile homes.
To the tires.
Okay, so let's shift to the next scenario where you represent the seller. And there's an offer, RV Mobile, on your listing. So preparation. What do you need to help negotiate for your seller? For example, information about the property, information market, all those kinds of things. Cindy, let's start with you.
Number one thing, I'm going to call the lender. So you just got an offer. Before you tell your clients, hey, this is a great offer, no matter how good it looks, you better talk to the lender.
Did you just hear what she said? The listing agent, call the lender. You will find in some market areas, Harris, for example, I get called, you probably got called, Mike, and yelled at, you know what your listing agent did? They call our buyer's lender. We don't do that up here. And they were furious. I mean, they said, no, you don't get to call our buyer. And yet that's exactly what a listing agent should do. And when I got the call from one of the fine brokers up there, said, I said, you know what? Our agents are required to. A good listing agent will do that.
Yeah. So when I am calling that lender, and the good lenders shouldn't have a problem with it, especially local ones understand it. Sometimes out-of-state lenders don't realize that you can talk to them. But when I'm calling before accepting the offer, and I'll tell my clients, hey, we did get this offer, but I'm going to check, on the pre-qual letter first, and then I'll let you know. I'm going to ask, is there another home that has to be sold? Is this contingent on the sale of that home? How long have you been working with this client? Like, I want to know, did they just qualify with them today because they saw this house, or have they been looking for houses? I'll ask a question sometimes that I know that they shouldn't answer, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, but I'll ask them, is this a W-2 employee?
Yeah.
Shouldn't answer it, but sometimes they do, and I'm
It's
looking,
their source of income.
I'm looking to see like how likely this deal is to go through. It's a lot easier to do a loan on a W-2 than it is to do a loan on a 1099 or, you know, self-employed where we've got these different checks. Sometimes you can find out from a lender that they've had a contract on another home that they've backed out on. I mean, these are things that I have found out in talking to lenders before. The other thing up front that's a huge deal to me, if you call a lender and you can't get a hold of them before the house is even under contract, you may have a hard time getting a hold of them throughout the process. If I can get a hold of the lender and they are personable and they want to talk to you and they're friendly, that's always a great sign to me.
That same point goes with buyer's agents and listing agents as well.
100%. That was one of the first things we said in the first question. But
again, you're all part of the team. I mean,
Yeah.
the title company is even on the team.
Sure.
You need to be able to talk to everybody.
Sure. So I'm verifying and then asking them, even though it says, and I want to know the difference, are they, and because the lenders will all use different terms on the letter. Sometimes they say pre-qualified, sometimes it's pre-approval. You want to know conditionally approved. Have they taken them through underwriting? How quickly do you think you can get this loan closed? Especially if it's an out-of-state lender, I will ask them, have you done loans in Texas? Because sometimes they will mess deals up just because they don't know Texas. They don't know our MUDs or PIDs.
Or taxes.
Yeah, there's things that they don't understand and timelines. So I want to know how quickly can you get this deal done? Do you see any issues? Are you concerned about anything? And just ask all these questions. Also, there is in the contract on the third party finance addendum there. So this is once we're under contract, but there is a line in that the buyer is signing off that gives the lender the right to talk to us. I had an out-of-state lender tell me, you can't call me. I can't release any of this information to you when I was calling to see, hey, are we clear to close? Where are we at on this deal? And I said, actually, yes, I know that you're out of state. You may not know, but our contract says this. Look at this third party addendum. You can give me this information. I'm asking you, are we approved? So sometimes you have to educate. I really don't like working with an out of state lender. That's honest to goodness. So if you can, sometimes if I get that letter and it's for Rocket Mortgage, if it's one of the big banks, sometimes I'll call the buyer's agent and say, hey, you know, got your pre-qual letter. Thanks. Tried to call, couldn't get a hold of anybody. Have you talked to your buyer about using a local lender? Great. And we've even had them say, oh, here, you know, who do you want us to use? And they will call and get it. I tell my clients, we cannot force them to use a specific lender, but you have a choice whether you want to take a contract or not.
Remember though, seller can say to the buyer, you can use whoever you want, but you have to be pre-qualified by a lender we like.
Yeah.
So you can require that because that way you've got a lender you trust who's really evaluated this buyer.
Yeah. But I think that's really important is making sure that you have verified that and talk to the buyer's agent to make sure that if they just showed them this one house because they called them from Zillow, you might want to know that. You might want to know if they put offers in on other houses and have backed out a couple times.
Or if they put an offer in another house at the same time.
Because sometimes they do that.
Yes.
But it's your due diligence for your clients. That's what it is. You do due diligence when you're representing a buyer, but as a listing agent, your due diligence is to make sure you know as much as you can about. I'm even a creeper, so sometimes
You what?
I'm a creeper.
How about
What's that mean?
It means
Stalker.
I'll look on Facebook or sometimes I'll look at LinkedIn because I want to know who they are, where they're from, what they do.
Sure. Okay.
If it's a public profile, it's not stalking.
Yeah.
It's not stalking? I thought it was.
I'm a bit of a creeper, but I'm gonna do it if I can.
grazing?
So I'll add to that.
The creeper part?
No, not the creeper. Yes, I'm the creeper. Yes. But one thing I'll do, in addition to the lender, I'm gonna check out the agent. I'm gonna check out the buyer's agent.
Sure.
I'm gonna see what broker they're with. I'm gonna look at their license number, see how long they've been in business. I'm gonna go on Netris and see how many buyers they've closed in the last year.
That's all part of the stalking. I do that.
No,
Everyone.
that's not stalking.
Yes, it is.
That's information gathering. And I'm gonna go on Facebook and I'm gonna see if anybody I'm friends with, if Angela's friends with them on Facebook, I'm gonna call Angela and say, tell me about this agent. Have you done a deal with them before? What's it like?
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I do have a safe search set up in the MLS that I can just put the license number in there and then tell me that on the buy side or the list side. So I can see in the past, however long I care to look, how many deals they've done.
Sure.
And not having done transactions is not necessarily a red flag. It just, I want to know what I'm
Well, you also, because some builder info is not in there. Like if you bought a new build, it's new construction in there.
Or team.
Yeah, good point. So what are the circumstances of your seller that may affect your negotiations? Like, your seller's situations, timing, have sell, properties that easy to sell, all those. What in your negotiation, you're asking questions. You've got that you're really good at questions, relationship, but in your negotiation, what is it you need to know from your seller circumstances to make decisions about how you negotiate for it?
Why are they selling?
Well,
okay.
I would assume that we're already past that you've already asked all these questions before you got the listing, you put it on the market.
No, but
if that's the case,
something, and then there's another piece to it that you found out because they accidentally text you in the group thread with their husband, but they thought they were just texting the husband.
So it's just reaffirming what
that's a creeper.
No, it was an awkward moment where it was like, I wish that they knew they could unsend this text, but they didn't. So then I got the phone call from the husband saying, hey, I'm sorry she sent that. She thought it was on the group text and we're not in agreement about a few things. And I was like, hey, it's fine. But what I did learn from her text was she told him, stop being greedy. I hate this house. I want out by the end of summer. And I was like, thank you for that information. Let's talk about face.
Well, so that's just it. The reason why I brought that up is because once you get an offer or you're going to start to figure out how to present it to your seller, you need to know if anything's changed from the time that you assessed their motivation the first time. Hopefully you were correct then. And now, okay, so when we first talked about this is going to get you to this point by this point with this much money and this little hassle. Has anything changed? Are your motivations still this?
Remember, when you list the property, you get all the information. It's all theoretical. That's real. They got an offer. They can find themselves in a contract. And one thing not all sellers understand, they cannot accept more than one offer. They've only got one house. Unless the buyers are good friends and want to live together, this is a problem. So they need to understand they're about to do something that's a commitment, that's important. So all of a sudden their thoughts change and they reaffirm and some things happen. So you'll have those conversations.
I like to do for my sellers. So in my listing presentation, I'll always give them a net sheet, and I usually give them a high, a low, and a standard, here's market value, whatever. And then when we start to get offers, I will redo the net sheet with all of the different things that were in the offer, especially if we've gotten multiple offers, because that's when they will start to see that just because someone has a higher sales price doesn't necessarily mean it's the better offer or that it nets them more. And I had this with clients recently where once I put together that net sheet, they actually ended up making 30K more from one buyer than they did with another. This was just last month. So putting that net sheet together helps them to realize what that bottom line actually becomes.
And how it can be affected, sure.
I don't do a net sheet, but even with just one offer, I have my own. Well, yeah, but I have I don't call it that. I have a little spreadsheet that I do that has all the information on there from all the different parts of the deal.
Okay, so let's clarify that.
I don't call it.
Track requires.
Yeah, but I don't call it that is what I'm saying.
Y'all know that there is a super easy one to use. Most of your title companies, before we had our own wonderful title company, Independence Title has, which I'm going to plug it because I can't. If y'all haven't worked with Austin, he is one of the sweetest people and he will make your clients happy. And Sprinkle over there is just sweet. They're all amazing and I definitely recommend them. And they're working really hard to incorporate some of the things that we like from other places. But you can go online to the tools for different title companies and you can make net sheets based off of that and print them. And yeah, you should be doing that anywhere you, I mean, every listing appointment, I'm always floored when I walk in and they say that the person before me didn't give them a net sheet. Like, and you could call it a different, yeah, she calls it a different thing.
I just call it a different thing.
But they need to know how much they're gonna be taking away.
Yes. Yeah, and it breaks down all the different elements of the contract.
Anybody want to add to that? Because what we're, and we've kind of, talked about relationships like that. What we're really doing with the seller, as you go through this whole process and dealing with it, you need to make sure you understand this, because they really are going from theoretical to real. And they're about to go into a situation where they say, oh, that's a real offer, and I can do it and be in a contract. And that means that when the perfect, better offer comes in tomorrow, I'm stuck.
Sometimes they don't understand that they're stuck. They think, well, I just don't want to sell to this person anymore. Well, you've already accepted it. So they need to understand there's more. It's hard once you've gone and said yes, it's hard to go back when you're the seller.
Yeah.
It's real hard to go back.
So I've had this experience where I'm discussing with the other agent a counter, let's say, or an offer, and the other agent says, my client will never accept that. And I said, well, I'm going to send it to you in writing. It's going to be sent to you in writing. And if you'll present it to your client, what I've learned is they see it in paper in front of them, their brain works differently than it's in theory.
So, been in my class before, I'm a big fan of the Texas Realtor Form, seller's invitation to buyer's submitting offer. Especially valuable when you have multiple offers, but even with one offer, it gives the seller the ability to say, okay, yeah, that's a pretty good offer, but I'd like it better if this, and this. You can send this to one page. You send it, has a big space in there where the seller says, I would treat yours more favorably if maybe price, maybe title company, maybe whatever. And it says on the form, it's not a counter offer. So it doesn't bind the seller or anything. It gives them the ability to tell the buyer, hey, here's what I'd like if you'll do this. And by the way, if you do this, doesn't mean we're in a contract. This means I will more favorably consider your offer. This keeps your seller in control. It's good communication because you're communicating to the other side and they see that you're working through the process. I love it. It's a great form. It's really helpful. You can even use it on just when you just got one offer. You say, hey, yeah, good offer, and here's what I like. So I really encourage you to make use of that. Be familiar with it because it can be very helpful as you work through the process. Because when they really think through it, especially if they have any friends helping them figure out how to do all this, and they go, because when that seller counters that offer, they've got to understand they can now be in a contract. If that buyer accepted all that counter, they're in a contract and they're committed. And the seller has incredibly minimal rights to termination, whereas the buyer's got a ton of them.
That's exactly what I was going to speak to. Is when I'm reviewing the offer and I go through the details of the offer, I don't just go, here's the close date, here's how much it is. If there are other terms in there, and talk with everything with the termination option. If there's an HOA, mandatory HOA, here's where that clock starts. I've already had the conversation with you about getting the documents done. Here's another out that the buyer has. Here's another out the buyer has. Here's another out the buyer has. At some point, the seller very likely is going to go, what else do I have? You got one. That's it. And then you can just say no. Everything else is just saying no. And so when they understand that, then it does make it much more real once you get there. I do want to speak to that buyer's or the seller's invitation to resubmit though. The agent on the other side of that is not going to get that. You're going to need to let them know what that's about. Because I have not done it that often, probably should be used more often. However, talking about getting cussed out. It was
they thought they were in a contract.
Yeah, the buyer's agent said, and it's a very low license number. Said, well, I had one old B use that on me, and it's just a slap in the face to my client. Now we're just not going to walk away. You can buy this house back yourself. Like, okay.
Yeah, this brings up a really valuable point. So that was not just this form.
You might want to educate them.
There's a lot of things you can do in a counter or in an offer that the other side won't understand because they haven't been well trained. And so you have to be prepared to explain it to them so they don't have that reaction. You need to presume up front they really won't know what we're just doing here. It's like when you've got the buyer and it's a mandatory HOA and you're looking at the addendum. Common one is A1. Seller provides everything, seller pays for it, buyer terminate 3 days. But it's not the best one. The best one is A3. When you try A3, just says, what are you doing here? What's going on? They'll think you're being sneaky or something. So you have to be prepared to explain it. I'm working on this last part. I haven't figured out how to do it yet. To charge a training fee to the agent on the other side of the deal. Figure out how I would make that work. So we're
I love it.
yeah, gotta work for this. But yeah,
Surcharge on fathoming.
and yeah. Gotta remember this is being recorded.
Yeah. To their point, it's kind of like the buyers getting all the information up front, because on the sell side, you do only have one contingency to get out, where the buyers have 9, 13, 36 out. So getting the documents you need, such as T47 survey, seller's disclosure, getting that all up front, because the seller's disclosure is huge. If they don't have that, then it's 3 days after they receive it. 7 days after they receive it to get out for any reason. So what is it? It's just an extended option period that they get for free.
Yep.
HOA as well.
Yeah.
3 days, you better have those documents in and that resale certificate sitting and waiting.
Yep, absolutely.
And that's important, you know, and the resale certificate.
Yeah,
That's the way that document is worded. It's not just the HOA.
And
box.
survey.
And- Exactly, yes. And you better know what box you checked, and that if you gave them the survey, but you didn't give the T47, you're probably paying for a new one. If it's required.
Yeah, absolutely. So you understand it. You have a question out here?
What's the one seller contingency, Nick, that he can get out of contract with?
Oh, non-delivery of earnest money.
But that's not really up to the seller. It's
No,
really
no.
up to the buyer. Yeah, so they need to.
Buyers to not deliver.
If they don't deliver,
Yes,
if they don't deliver, it's the option for the seller to terminate. He doesn't have to.
Yes, but they need to understand that.
Yeah.
Most likely the person's, if the buyer does their stuff like they're supposed to, you don't really have an out.
No. Yep.
But that's what I tell them is you can say no to these things. If they ask for repairs, you can be a stickler and say no.
Yeah, absolutely. The seller's in control of those kinds of things. Absolutely.
Yeah, if the house doesn't appraise, because this is the question that they'll ask is, well, what happens if the house doesn't get appraisal? And then I say, well, it's a negotiation. Depending on how we've done the contract, it's probably negotiation at that point.
Yeah.
And then what if it comes up short? You know, we don't have this appraisal waiver. You can choose not to lower your price. You can say, no, I'm sticking at this. And if they want to walk, they can. That's your way of getting out. But yeah, there's.
Tell me about the seller circumstances when they sell, and they close, where they going? Here's your challenge. When the seller gets ready to close, and we have this happen on a very regular basis, they're going to another house, maybe a new home, they paid earnest money, and they've got a tight turn time. You're going to close on this one, Thursday, they're closing on the other Friday, they're moving that weekend. So it's incredibly time sensitive that if they don't close on this time frame, they've got a real problem. So when you have that conversation with the seller, you need to know how tight that is, because without making them paranoid about anything, you need to say, you know what? Not all contracts close. Not all contracts close on time. And we need to make sure we've got a backup. Where are you dealing with here? Because that happens, and it happens on a regular basis. It doesn't happen once in a blue moon. It happens on a regular basis. So we need to make sure we've had that conversation, because when you're having those questions and you go through the relationships and you understand what your seller's circumstances are as you're negotiating, you may be negotiating a totally different time frame based on where they need to go.
Well, my advice is to always get at least a 1 week lease back, and ideally it's courtesy, but things do happen.
Absolutely.
Stuff comes up, and I have had people before, again, when you get burned and you learn, and it rhymes, so maybe that could be like a title, burn and learn. When someone says, when I ask them, hey, do you want me to put in here that you're going to need a lease back? Oh, no, we don't want that. And you're negotiating a contract. No, we don't need that. We're going to be out by then. I learned the hard way that you need to say, you know what, I'm going to get you a week. And if you decide you don't need it at that point, we can terminate it. But I just want to make sure that we're safe here, because what happens is inevitably they get to the end of the deal and they're like, shoot, we're not going to be out in time. We don't really, I literally had a guy at the beginning of this year and he was like, yeah, I'm just tired. I don't think I want to move all the stuff out tonight. And I'm like, bro, you better get after it because your option is done. You've got to get out of this house. And he was like, well, what happens if I don't?
They get your stuff.
So that can also, that can also help if you're in multiple offers. If the seller said they didn't need it, but you put it in there anyway, but 2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks back and the seller's looking at
The
multiple
only
offers,
time,
it could help you get on.
the only time I don't get a lease back on there is if they've already moved out of the house. The house is vacant. Yeah, you don't need it. If they're still in it, you probably need it, just to be safe.
So this kind of gets into the question where you're dealing with, we talked about this on the buyer side. Once we have a contract, what's the likelihood of this closing? As you negotiate with the seller, you're asking all these questions. You know, we understand things that we can do on the buyer side, but if you're on the listing side, you're asking a lot of questions to make sure everything's good on the buyer side. But then somehow, as you get burned, you learn, you find out, you know, what's the seller doing about moving? They have movers coming in the day of, the day after, are they packing? You know, where are they? Every time you go over there, everything is still just like it was. But you're exactly right. Sometimes seller and buyer say, yeah, we just don't want to do it yet.
Are they getting repairs they agreed to do completed on
By the
time?
way, that seller was the buyer I fired. He's not on the Christmas card list.
Was he tired?
Yeah,
I was tired. I was like, you don't know what tired is.
yeah, it's worked through that. So that, you know, that's a real key here as you go through it. So in this whole process, and your job is not just to get them into the seller into a good contract, make sure they understand they're committed to buying it, but all the things you can do from your seller side to make sure they're cooperating, they're doing all the things they need to do, because there are obligations the seller has in the contract, especially if there's a picture of lease addendum, HOA, things of that nature. And so you need to help them make sure, here's how we're going to enhance this thing going from contract to closing. And because of these situations, you're going to continually have communication with that seller to make sure they haven't changed their mind about selling. That's your big risk. As long as the buyer wants to buy and the seller won't sell, the deal's going to close. But when that changes, you want to be the first one to know that. Yep. That can be a real challenge. And so in your negotiation, one of the things you're doing to get that is you're having that constant communication. That constant communication and those questions, you can start looking for those little bit of red flags and say, we had no idea moving was this hard. Oops.
Bob, Valentine's Day of 2020.
A great day in your memory.
Remember that? Yeah, that was the one seller. It was my first time to have a seller say they weren't going to go to the closing table. They weren't going to sell. And I had to call you. I was panicked because I had never had this. I was like, what do you do? But I had the little red flags because I kept telling her from the beginning, this was one of the people that where you get burned on the make sure you get the lease back. Because I said, let's get you a lease back. No, I'm moving out before we're done. I'm going to move out in 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, okay. So we didn't get the lease back. 2 weeks came, she was still there. And I was like, she had said she was going to get an apartment. And I kept asking her, have you gotten your apartment yet? No, I'm going to see him this date. And then as we got closer to the last week, now she's asking me to take her to see things and wants to see things in Fort Worth. I mean, all these different things like red flags coming up, and we get to closing day and she's like, yeah, I'm not selling anymore. I'm not moving. I had to call Bob. Do you guys know what you do in that situation?
No, drink.
Besides, that was later in the night.
Yeah, but
To advise her through an email and say, I think at the time it was section 15. I don't remember if the contract like
Paragraph 15.
Paragraph 15. Please read this, talk to an attorney, let me know how you wish to proceed. She looked at that, saw it, and her husband called me back and said, we are so sorry, we're going to be at the closing table. And then he called me a week later and he put her on the phone and made her apologize for the way they had acted. But that was like one of the worst.
Yep. Because you know,
but getting it in writing with an email and saying, you know, please read this section of the contract.
Once they realize the consequences, including, by the way, we could send them an invoice for the commission because they owe us. And once they realize attorney, commission, all that stuff, you did exactly the right thing, you put them on board and say, oh, well, now they explained it, we're going to go to close.
Yeah, that was a rough day.
And it kind of gets to be
but they did close.
Challenge.
Assuming your seller doesn't decide not to close the last second. But just along the way, I would like to talk about a little concept called holding something back and letting them know that. So cushion yourself, hold a little something back. You need a little extra time. Let's go ahead and ask for it at the beginning. You need, you think you are only going to do this much in repairs? Well, count on a little bit more just in case, you know, because maybe that repair is going to be a little bit more than you think it is, or it's going to lead to something else. Try to get them to realize that just because it's under contract right now, that's not the exact way it's going to go to closing. And you may have to change some, adjust some things, and they need to be a little bit flexible along the way. So don't get right up to your drop dead line in the sand and be inflexible after that. So I just let them know that ahead of time, and it makes it a lot smoother, because then they go, oh, glad you told me to do that. Yep.
So I tell sellers to expect 1 to 2% in repairs. And if it's anywhere under 1%, you've won big time. It costs them $5,000, but they consider that a win.
That's too much. That's too much. Oh.
So let's take a scenario where you're now in a contract and you're moving from contract to closing process. And you'll have a negotiating strategy to go with your client, buyer, seller, go through the process and deal with it. So once contract and we want to go to closing, avoiding that thing that not all contracts close. What are the broad negotiation points from contract to closing that we find ourselves dealing with that we need to make sure we address with our client? Example, repairs. Is that a broad negotiating point?
Yeah.
Does it happen in every transaction?
Not in every transaction. I tell buyers and sellers both, when there are repairs, instead of, if I've got the sellers, instead of you doing these repairs, let's offer a credit. When it's my buyers, I tell them, instead of having the seller do these repairs, let's ask for a credit. Because the one thing you want your clients to know, like if you're representing the seller, they're done with the house, right? They've disconnected now. They're going to do the fix the cheapest they can. If they got 3 quotes, they're going with the cheapest. It may not be the best, or they're going to try and, oh yeah, I did that myself. What? No, you want it done the way you want it done. And I'll tell my buyers that. You want to pick the contractor, you want to know you got it the way you want it, get the credit instead. And on the selling side, I tell them, just give the credit. That way you don't have to worry if it's done to their standard. What you don't want is, yes, we did these repairs. They come for the final walkthrough and they're like, well, this isn't the way I wanted it. Give them the credit. That is the best way to do it. And when I'm negotiating.
And even the lenders like it to do it right.
Yes. And when I'm negotiating, if I'm representing the buyer, when it comes to repairs, I'm going to send the big list. Now, as a courtesy, I don't typically send the listing agent the entire inspection report unless they ask for it. I'll send the items, but we're going to send a longer list and then we'll ask for a credit in lieu of repairs. I let them go first to tell us what they want to offer instead of putting it out first. If you can go first in a negotiation, don't. Let them go first. Get them to give you what they're thinking, because you may have been thinking, okay, well, all these repairs, my gosh, this is like $5,000. And then they come back and they're like, we're going to want $2,500. And I'm like, we'll do 2,000. Okay, great. And we just won. But if we had gone out first and said, hey, we're going to do 5,000, they're like, we'll settle for 55. Okay. And we just paid more than we needed to. So you don't want to be the first one. But I also, when I'm on the listing side, my sellers, and this will happen, y'all know in Texas, I assume you know that in Texas, the fridge does not convey unless it's built in.
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means. Usually if it's really expensive, it conveys.
Yeah.
If they bought it at Walmart or Home Depot, whatever, then it probably doesn't convey. But when they tell me, Angela, I don't want to take this, I don't want to take washer and dryer, just say it's included with the house. Then I tell them, we're not going to include it. We can say it's negotiable, but that's what we'll hold in our back pocket for repairs. Hey, you know what? Instead of giving you all these repairs, we'll have the sprinklers fixed because that's like $150. But we're going to throw in this brand new fridge. Tell your buyers that they can have the fridge. And they're like, okay, great. I just did this on a house 2 months ago. They got the fridge. My clients didn't want the fridge in the first place. They got it done.
Yep.
The other thing on my sellers for repairs is when I walk through at the listing appointment and they're like, yeah, so this is broken or whatever, this is broken, we're going to get this fixed. Sometimes I will tell them, you're going to put that, well, not sometimes on this part, Bob. I always tell them they're going to put it in the seller's disclosure. But what I sometimes will say is, don't fix that yet. You already know about it. You're gonna disclose it. If we end up having to fix it because the buyer asks, they're gonna think it's a win because they said, we want this done. We're like, all right, fine, we'll do it. We were already gonna do it. I just don't.
Negotiation in your back pocket.
Yes.
Trade-offs to use.
Right, exactly. But also, let me put this out there. When I do have somebody put it in the seller's disclosure, I even did this with Paulette Green recently, and that woman is amazing, by the way. You want to talk about a good agent.
Who should be with us?
She asked me to be on her team. She was so sweet.
Are you on your team? Yeah.
I would love to be on her team. I mean, not really, guys, sorry. But anyways, on my sellers, they had disclosed in the seller's disclosure that the ice maker on the fridge doesn't work. This is a built-in expensive fridge, Thermador, that does convey. And they were like, well, I guess we need to get this fixed. And I said, no, just put it in the disclosure. We put it in the disclosure. Lo and behold, here comes the report, and they're asking, we want the fridge repaired. You know, the ice maker doesn't work. And I said, hey, remember the seller's disclosure that your client signed that says this is what was wrong with it? And we said that in the disclosure, and that they signed the contract saying they were buying it as is, and they knew this. We're not going to fix that now. And you know what they said? Oh yeah, it wasn't there. Okay. That doesn't always work that way, but if it becomes
them to read the contract and say, oh yeah.
Like, remember the seller's disclosure that your client signed every initial on every single page, and then their name on the bottom and their initial, that one that disclosed it.
That's perfect. That's right. Anything besides repairs that are points of negotiation from contract to closing.
Can I piggyback on repairs real quick?
Sure.
So, especially on the buy side, going back to liability, if it's foundation or built before 83 with cast iron pipes, have the seller do it, because that taking money in lieu of repairs.
Well, some of those things you can't. I probably should have clarified. Yeah. On a roof, you don't take money in lieu of repairs. If it has to be done for insurability, if it's a lender required repair, which I would assume a foundation.
It depends.
Most likely.
I like it. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It just depends.
But it's a good. You brought up a really good point. That's not an all encompassing. That's like, okay, we've got a voided thermal seal on this window, which we do. Do we ask for that, or do we just get a credit? We just get a credit for that. If it's a roof, if it's a foundation, though, if it's mold, no, thank you. Like, go ahead. Yeah. But I would be specific about who's doing the work.
Right. Oh, absolutely. It does depend, doesn't it?
Or if the buyer has no money.
Or the buyer has no money.
If the buyer has no money and can't fix it after they get in, the first time home buyers, every penny's going to closing costs and down payment and everything else. You're just going to have to know that they're not going to get this fixed right away. And if they want it fixed right away, it's going to have to be done by the seller. So that's it.
Even for that matter, if the seller doesn't have any money, find a contractor that can do it at closing, get paid at closing.
I have a question, Bo. When you said the buyer accepts the property as is, but the thing is, the inspection has not been done yet, right?
Well, that's why you have the amendment, because you're amending that section in the contract.
Oh, so you put an amendment with that?
That's the repair amendment.
You're
changing that specific paragraph.
In the paragraph above, buying it as is, it said that it doesn't preclude the buyer from doing any repair or asking for repairs, any amendments, anything like that. They're just buying it as they see it when they walk through the house.
So usually marked at one, right?
Unless if you're a buyer and you walk through a house and you see a broken window, like there's actually a hole, someone has kicked a ball through a window, you see that that's broken. Could even be in the seller's disclosure, but you see something and your buyer wouldn't purchase the house if it's not fixed, then you need to put it in that section. Like if you walked through and you saw it, hey, the garage door won't close, it's totally broken, put it in there as we're buying this, but this is going to be fixed. But then you still have the amendment that can go back and change that section. But it's important that you explain to your sellers when they're signing a contract, hey, they check this box that says as is, but don't get excited. This doesn't just mean that they're not asking you for any repairs, because they can come back after this inspection and now ask for these things. Oh.
Perfect. That's exactly right. And that's your knowledge of what's in the contract, what the parties have agreed to. They've agreed to all of that in the contract. Trust me, the agent, the person on the other side, they don't know that. So I'm ready. They just...
They don't read it. Seriously,
they don't
read it.
They don't know
make sure you read the contract, please.
Absolutely. Perfect. Anything else? Any other besides repairs? Any other negotiating points?
I mean, if people's position changes they need the house for a little bit longer, then you can try to tack on a lease back if you don't already have one, or extend it, or
things
like that.
How about paragraph 14? How about the windstorm? How about the hail? How about things happen?
Those are two loss.
Then you're going to negotiate between the seller and buyer, because the seller has to take care of this prior to closing if at all possible. But if not, here's some things we can negotiate to deal with that. And that's where you get the seller and the insurance company work through that. So you have some other types of things based on circumstances, based on what happens. You find out after the fact that your seller is a foreign person. And now we may have a property issue that we have to address.
I had that.
Yeah. And so we don't want any surprises at closing, and we know what the title companies are doing to help us work through that process. So you have all kinds of things that you work through and deal with all the time. And because you're in that relationship and going forward, good. Now, help me again, and this is a little bit of a red flag issue that we've talked about before. In this phase, contract and closing phase, are there things that could happen that cause the contract to fail? Things that you say, hey, we just can't move forward on that. Are there things that the parties are required to do that if it doesn't happen, let's say, for example, lender required repairs? What are the parties required to do regarding lender required repairs? Nothing. Nothing. In fact, it says in the contract, he says, buyer and seller, if they're not required, neither is required to pay for lender required repairs. But if they don't come to an agreement, it's contract terminated. That's a new point of negotiation because the buyers had their appraisal done. The process appraiser says, yeah, I've done this value to. And so now we got a negotiating point. And if we don't resolve something, then this contract is failed. So your seller and the buyer needs to know, hey, here's what could happen if we don't come to some agreement. There's a tricky little thing in that same paragraph. And it's the 5% number. If you've got a nice, expensive home, which is not as expensive as it used to be, but let's say you've got an $800,000 house and their lender required repairs, maybe roof, have foundation, whatever. And the lender required repairs come to $41,000. Well, in that paragraph, if the lender required repairs are in excess of 5% of the sales price, are terminated, even if the seller is going to take care of it. So you may have a seller and seller says, well, okay, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And the buyer says, you know what? I don't want to buy a house that's starting off at the beginning. We got $41,000 in repairs. But the buyer terminated as you go through that process. And you understanding that little thing that's in the contract, as you read the contract, gives your client a real edge. Just work through that. Any final questions from the group about all this? You saw some real common threads as we work through it all. Anything? Anybody? Tommy? Oh, yeah. You're going to talk about tomorrow? Yeah. Burger Thursday?
Tomorrow is our office meeting at 11 o'clock. And then we're Jason, you can say sous chefs, chefs, sous chefs. Hot dogs and baked beans and a dessert as well.
What's for dessert?
It's going to be a peach crisp. It was the winning.
Really? Okay, from the bow tie thing. Okay.
So it's 11, it's 11, it's very important tomorrow because we'll be popping some things on the wall. And then we got one play after that 12 o'clock.
Perfect.
And on your note, two things to add to this. You see in special provisions the word pink to match, no sir. And professionally clean, no sir.
Great.
And for the meeting tomorrow, we'll have a market up there.
Maybe a bargain.
Hey, I've got one exciting big announcement. Very, very few people know about it.
Okay, perfect. Let's give a big hand to our panel. Very much.
One more thing. I forgot how good it's like. Yeah, well, I tried to spend
How are you? Good to see you. Always. Watch all our travel.
Right now.
Thank you very much. Thanks. You can tell Tisha that you held up the honor of your. I've seen you around. I've seen you coming on. A while ago.
Yeah, I'm definitely taking a little bit of this summer. It's cool. The frustrating thing, this is where we're at, it's like, I believe that Baylor is the right fit for her. She loved it. I do believe it's the right fit, but it's $7 a year. And A&M is like 25 or 30 a year. And you're going, well, you're getting a degree from a great school either way. They really.
Thank you for setting up.
Part of the development that I'm that's what really great about it, and we'll focus on it. Some of if they're to do it.
She got it unexpected. She got a little new business.
Yeah, they do some really good stuff.